Hello, and welcome back to the 12th episode of Not the Same, a podcast where I bring you true stories of real people sharing their personal testimonies of transformation. I'm your host, Rachel Heinberg. Speaking with some ladies this last weekend, I was sharing how much I am enjoying this podcast and what God is doing in me through each episode. And even though I may sound like a broken record, I am being honest when I say what a privilege. I am so grateful for all of you who've given me feedback. We're coming up on 2 months now, and we've hit over 1,000 downloads from various platforms. So if you've just tuned in, that's great. Thank you. However you found us, I'm glad you did, and I hope this will become a new favorite. We are available on all major platforms, so choose your favorite, like, subscribe, follow, and please share to make sure you don't miss out. Also, if you are able to give a positive review on whatever platform you're using, that would be a blessing. Last week, I was able to sit down with a true gem in our church. Natasha and I had a great time, and I trust her testimony will be an encouragement to others as well. Many people may not know, but she is currently battling cancer, like a champ, I will add. So if you remember, please keep her and her family in your prayers. This week, I'm excited to be with Mpho Mothoa from one of our churches here in South Africa. I caught a bit of her story in passing a few weeks back, and it made me think it would connect well with a lot of people from different backgrounds. So let's get started. First of all, thank you, Mpho.
Thank you.
I appreciate you agreeing and traveling this way. I know it's a distance.
Pleasure.
Normally, we start with how you grew up. Just tell me a bit about growing up, what your viewpoints in life were, maybe some family background, and we'll go from there.
Okay, so I grew up in Leppenville, Hammanskraal, which is at the outskirts of Pretoria. If you travel 10 minutes in either direction, you end up in one of the other provinces because it's like at the borderline.
Okay.
I grew up with my mom, my dad, and 4 of my siblings. So we're 5. I'm the last one. Growing up, my mom had like a lot of love for people. So I would have cousins coming in to stay with us. And we grew up very religious. My dad they called him Morudi, a priest. He was not the one preaching in the ZCC church. That's the Zion Christian Church.
Okay.
But he would be the one reading either the announcements or some of the letters from Moria, which is like their mother church. Like if we were Muslim, Moria would be our Mecca. So every Easter we would go there. All the members from all the provinces would be headed there. So that was pretty much my childhood. And we were at church Sunday. In the morning, there was Sunday school. And around 11 or 12 o'clock, there would be what they call mukuku, and that would be for the men. So like they would be stamping their feet and then they jump.
What would be the purpose of that?
It would be like praising. And then the ladies were involved in what they would call choir. They sing and they hum. There's a lot of things that bothered me, but because obviously I didn't know any better, I'd be like, okay, cool. So I would question a lot of things, but I would just leave it. Like I left it at the back of my head. Around 2 o'clock, that's when service would start. So now we'd be at church the whole day. Things like that annoyed me. They would like use the commandments on us, honor your father and mother. So I didn't want to really complain about some of these things. If my family's doing it, I'm just going to do it as well. So that was most of our lives. For me, I wanted to be like my mom so much. So I would do everything she does. Okay, I was a naughty child. So like I was in and out of creches. So what would happen was that they would leave me at home with my nanny, and I wanted to be with my siblings. I didn't want to be left at home alone. So in our household, I'd never seen any violence. I've never seen my dad hit my mom or my mom hit or any of those things.
So you had your mom, obviously she loved you guys. They were involved in the church. You had your father who was present in the home.
Yeah.
Were they married as well? Okay.
So they got married in 1992 because my mom was pregnant with my sister. So we're very tight. My eldest brother is 7 years older than me. So I remember my nanny, she asked me to get like one of the detergents for her. And then she hit me. So I think from there, I was like, but why? You know? And then I started, basically when the bus would stop at our gate to pick up my sister, I would sneak in, hide under the chair. And then when they get off, I would get off at her creche. I would walk out with her and then I would be in her class. Like she didn't mind because it gave her attention as well.
And what about the teachers?
Then when the teachers eventually pick it up that, wait, hold up, there's an extra young member here, they would then call. Then my aunt would come, get me. And then I did that, I think, twice. And my mom was like, this has to stop. But then eventually they took my nanny away. And then I stayed. And then I got a different one. And then I would stay a bit. But then...
So do you think you did this because you wanted to be with her or you wanted to leave your nanny?
I think it was both. That would later play another role because even when eventually I was in creche, I would escape, go to my brother's school. I would be in class. I would learn. When the other kids go to a nap, I would sneak out. There was a hole in the fence.
People are going to think that I've sped up your audio, but this is literally how fast she's talking.
So then I would escape to his class, and then the teacher would catch me there. Then I would run and go to my other brother's school. Then
So you were busy.
I was very busy. Eventually, they just left it. And that's how I ended up being in grade 1 at the age of 5. They put me in my elder brother's school. So I felt like we're running the show because he was in grade 7 and I came in to be in grade 1. When I came in, he introduces me. He's like, boys, this is my sister. Nobody touches her. So I felt like I always have protection at home, at school. So I lived a very happy life. So later on, my mom was like, you're playing too much. You need to be serious now. And that's where the whole thing of being serious about school started. My brother finished and then my dad decided to move me. So this is where most of my life started changing now.
Okay.
So he moved me from the community school that I was used to. It was all black. They spoke Tswana. At that time, I didn't know English or any other language. He took me out and then they put me in the multiracial school. And it was a Christian school.
Okay. And what grade were you when you went?
So I was in grade 4 when I got there. And the first year was horrible because I didn't know English. I didn't know Afrikaans. So what happened now is I'm learning English. So I have to take extra English classes. I have to take extra Afrikaans classes. So my dad spoke fluent Afrikaans. So that sort of started helping.
Okay.
So now I'm in a multiracial Christian school and we had Bible studies. That's where things started getting interesting now, because in my mind, remember, I grew up in a Zion Christian church. So I thought I'm a Christian and whatever, until we're now reading the Bible. I'm like, but hold up. Why does the Bible mention this, but my church doesn't do this? Those would be the questions that I started asking now at home. And I could see that my parents were a bit now, they would brush it off. Most Africans, they don't like being questioned or like asking questions. But for me, it wasn't questions to sort of undermine, but I wanted to know, like I wanted to understand. I need to be able to connect the two.
Just by your own words, you could see you were a very, very curious child. I can see how you just were like, oh, well, why? I think I was probably like that as well.
Yeah. So now I took that now to Sunday school. And those teachers were not happy. I wanted to know more. Eventually, I became a nuisance in Sunday school. So they put me out of Sunday school. Part of me was happy because then I don't have to be at church early. So I can be there the whole day.
How did your parents react to you getting kicked out of
I didn't tell my dad, but I remember telling my mom, and she just had this thing of, here we go again.
Yeah.
Today, what now? So I didn't mind that. But I started knowing more about the Bible because we had Bible study. My 4 years there, that was compulsory. And even the songs we would sing at assembly. So I was like, oh, I love this. So I started loving the music from there. It was different, but I felt like I'm starting to relate to this more because I could ask questions and then I could get answers. So that started pushing me in that direction.
So a question in this whole time. So you said 4 years. So grade 4, 5, 6, 7 before you went to high school.
Yeah.
The more you learned actually about the Bible and read the Bible.
Yeah.
Did it draw you more that way, or did it just create more confusion?
It drew me more that way, but there would be scriptures that I don't understand. And then I would have a question. And then when I would go back to church, nobody wanted
no answers.
There's no answers. For me, I wanted answers.
Okay.
So during that period, I used to be a sickly child. The crèche that I was in, I ate something there and they couldn't pick up what I'm actually allergic to. So I ended up in hospital. So because the doctors couldn't figure out what I'm actually allergic to, they told my mom what I couldn't eat. So then I couldn't eat like starch and all of it. So they gave her like a whole list.
Wow.
So now my life, it was protected, it was covered, but now it's being more strict. Like my parents were strict generally because my dad at that time, he was a police officer. My mom was a teacher, a very strict one. So there was no easy way out.
Yeah.
Like, even when we wanted to be naughty, she bought a jungle gym and all of that. She was like, you guys are not going anywhere. Play in the yard.
It's amazing, actually. She was very present. She was so protective. I mean, you just don't find that so much here, which is actually, in hindsight, is a blessing, right? I'm sure as a kid, you don't like restrictions.
As a kid, I was like, no. But when I look back, I was so grateful. So my mom never allowed us to go visit, like to sleep over. If she's not there, you wouldn't go because she was like, she heard too many stories. So back to the sickness thing. So now it created this thing in me where I'm like, okay, I'm sick and I don't even know why. During the time when I'm in my primary school, I still had those restrictions. So now I could only eat things that has like a barcode that my mom could tell what's in it. Like I could eat meat and whatever, and then I could only have like brown maize meal, brown rice, brown sugar, everything brown. So I was actually more healthier, but I didn't like it because I can't have ice cream. I'm seeing all my friends. So that was that. And then I developed nose bleeding, hemophilia. And they also didn't know why or how. So I don't know if you know about the Zion Christian Church. So it's different. This one, it has different levels. So with the Zion Christian Church, he started the church in 1910. That's when they said he got his divine healing and anointing as a prophet. So essentially, he was taught by missionaries. He saw it as being too white or too Western, and he wanted to create a church that accommodates Africans. So that's where he peeled away from that and then started bringing the African practices into that. What happens is that they would back up a lot of what they're saying by saying, but here's the scripture. But then they were twisted, and where Israelites maybe were like burning incense, they would be like, that's why we're burning newspapers. So they would try to find a way to manipulate scriptures to accommodate
and justify what they're
exactly. Even sprinkling people with water before they go into the church ground because they would need to purify you. ZCC members also don't eat pork. The women wear covering on their heads and all these things. We were literally living by the Lord. Back to me with the hemophilia issue. So the church has like prophets. They would tell your parents what you need to do in order to be healed. So with me, they made me wear this key. They got a string, got a key. I don't even know which lock it belonged to. So apparently they were like, I have to wear that key, and then the hemophilia would stop.
Wow.
Every day, I would only take it off when I'm bathing, and then I'd have to keep it on. There would be also strings that we had to wear around our waist for protection. Every clothing item of every ZCC person has like a blue patch thing that they sew for protection. And a lot of the things that I'm actually going to share now, we were never allowed to speak out about anything. You're not allowed to speak up about what happens at the church. You're not allowed to speak about what happens at Moria, because even when you go there, they confiscate your phones. They do not allow cameras.
Now it's starting to sound like the LDS, the Mormons, the Church of the Latter-day Saints.
Mm-hmm.
They don't call themselves Mormons anymore. They call themselves LDS. But certain things you have to wear, and there's lots of secrecy when you start getting up into the temples.
Yes.
Even to this day, it's kept quite under wraps.
Yes. It's a cult. They know there's some practices there that are also against human rights. So they're hiding all of that.
Real quick, when you were wearing this key, did it go away?
I can't remember how long I had the key for, but at some stage I stopped nose bleeding because maybe now I'm doing more sports at school. I don't know.
Interesting.
So I had that key. I'm still wearing the strings. I'm still asking questions and nobody's answering. There are still these prophets that are acting very weird, like demonic type of weird. If you've ever seen these sangomas shaking, they'll be shaking, and I'm like, and then they sort of give you a prophecy about you. But the problem I had with that was, you're saying the neighbor down the road wants to kill me, so I must drink this thing and that thing. And so they're creating this fear because they're saying all of these things, and then you just drink whatever they tell you to drink, and they'll tell you maybe for 3 days you must steam yourself with this herb and that herb.
It's essentially the exact same thing as going to a sangoma.
So the history of it is that people who are normally anointed as prophets, some of them were traditional healers, but when you come into the church, they tell you to renounce, you give away your bones, you give them your whatever stuff that you're using, and then they baptize you. Then you become a ZCC member, but then they use the gifts to sort of help in the church.
That is so wild.
It's crazy, and they keep all of that under wraps. So for me, I would just go with the flow because that's what my mom said I must do. Eventually, the hemophilia did go away. I was still going to church, and part of me started sort of like detaching away spiritually. Like I would just go through the motions, because before you go, if you're not wearing the uniform, they would sprinkle you with water to cleanse you. And they sprinkled me with water, and then I started getting a rash. I had an allergic reaction now. I told my mom about it, and she was like, okay, wear the uniform so that they don't have to sprinkle you. But also, you can't wear the uniform if you haven't been cleansed. I'd have to go through all of that, get the allergic reaction just to go to church. And I remember telling her, I was like, this is too hard. I can't be going through all of this, get the allergic reaction. Now I have to go to the doctor to get allergy medicine just to come back to church. And then she was like, you know what? ZCC has a lot of branches, right? Try out the other church. So I went to the other one, and I was like, okay, maybe this one is a bit better. And then I went again, and then I got an allergic reaction.
It's interesting that your mom, in a sense, she knows, okay, something's not right.
Something's not right.
But let's not
push it.
Yeah.
When she was in college, she says she got saved or something like that. So some of the way she did things was in the godly way. She was like this peaceable woman, never in conflict, things like that. My dad, if he's not at work, he was at church. When they get home, they're counseling people. We had to be making tea, and
your parents were really like kind people.
Yeah, they really were. So for me, I was proud of him, like that thing of, oh wow, okay, my dad's like a hero because of things like that. But I also had that side of, but you're also making us go to this church. Now we're back to, I'm having these allergic reactions. Part of me was like, okay, let me just read my Bible. So we did have Bibles at home, but ZCC's Bible is their own Bible. It's like the Mormon Bible. It's basically what they want to teach the people. It's not everything. There would be missionaries who'd like bring Bibles to school. So I had that. So I would read that. Again, I had a lot of energy, so I was in detention a lot. How they would punish you sometimes is that they would make you copy the Bible and rewrite it in your book. And then at some stage, I'm noticing things as I'm writing. I'm like, wait, God says this, God said that.
Getting in trouble was actually beneficial.
It did help. And then now, fast forward, I get to high school. Sometimes I'm going to church, sometimes I'm not. Now in high school, grade 9 came. That's when a lot started happening for me because I started having reduced energy. I started getting pale. My parents didn't know what was happening. I would tell my mom, listen, I don't have energy at all. And then my siblings were like, no, you're just lying. So what happened as well is that my period came, at the moment it came, it was like the floodgates were open. And I started losing more and more blood. That was terrible. But I was like, okay, I'm just managing. You're just taught to just cope with it. She asked the prophet. Some of them were like, oh no, drink this tea or whatever. But I just got worse. The more they tried all these methods and whatever, I was just getting worse. Eventually, I fainted at school. So after I fainted at school, they called my parents. So my mom, she came. I think they were both there, and then they picked me up. So we went to the doctor. They tested me and they took my blood samples, and then we went back home. When they did eventually get the results from the lab, they just came to my school. They were like, listen, the doctor came. We have to go. And they didn't tell them the full story. They didn't tell me the full story either. So when we got there, they had the results from the lab, and then the doctor, she's showing them the results and she's explaining each line. She's like, I don't even know why he's still alive, actually, because you are not producing enough blood at the rate that you're losing. And I was like, okay, what does that mean? Like for me, school was everything. So my thing was, okay, get it over and done with. I have science expo coming up in 2 weeks. And then they were like, listen, you're not going home. So I was admitted immediately that night in my school uniform with my school bag. I just started crying. I was like, you don't understand. Science expo is in 2 weeks. We have to present. I have this, I have the information. Da, 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 da. I'm trying to negotiate with the doctor. And my dad was like, will you stop it? like
you don't understand, you're going to be dead.
Because I'm type O, they were like, listen, we have to go look for blood immediately as well. And that night was one of the worst nights of my life. The nurses were sort of like whispering. They didn't know I knew Afrikaans. And I could hear them saying, we don't know what we're going to do. So they were still waiting for more blood to be brought in because from what they were gathering, I needed a lot of it. The moment they started, they used like 3-4 of the bags. But the thing is, the first one, my body reacted badly. I started shaking. I had the fevers. Everything was just so messy. Like that night, I remember I fainted actually. And they was trying to figure out like what's happening. And then my dad, the next day, he brought like this other tea. Like to see people are big on their teas. They think a tea fixes everything. So he came with those things and that made me worse. I vomited it out. And then every hour the nurses have to come and check is my body, like accepting the blood. I think I was only stable the next day. I can't remember, but there was a day when I passed out again. I remember when I woke up, I'm like, am I dying? Am I, But after the first week, I started getting better.
So during this time, you're coming from a super religious background. Did you ever cry to God? Did you ever pray?
So for the most part, I was like, okay, what's happening? I didn't know anything about salvation at that point. After the 2 weeks, the doctor still didn't know what was wrong with me, but they had given me enough blood to sort of be stable.
They hadn't diagnosed you. They just knew your counts were low.
Yes. They wouldn't know what was wrong with me actually for the next 5 years after that.
Wow.
So after 2 weeks, I was stable enough. So they gave me medication and they were like, this is it. This is your life. That was the only thing they could do for me at that point because they didn't know what was wrong with me.
Yeah.
So I lived like that. I eventually went back to school. Comes 2008, that's where everything changed. So my brother, he got saved 2006 or 2007.
And how old was he?
18, 19, somewhere there.
Okay.
He wrote a letter because he knew you step out, you get ostracized. That's it. No, we don't talk to you. Like they kick you out of the family, basically.
Yeah.
So because he was scared, he wrote a letter first before coming home to be like, Dad, I forgive you. Da, 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 da. One of the things that he was forgiving my dad for was something that I still held against my dad. I would see things and I'm like, but that's unfair. So I kind of felt like my dad would take out his frustrations on my siblings a lot. So it was the disciplinary part of it. He wouldn't do it in front of me. Like he had that thing of, okay, in the room, closes the door.
Okay.
But for me...
So basically his disciplinary side was just intense.
It was intense. So for me, I still had that bitterness against him for that. So when I heard that my brother forgave him, I'm like, why did he forgive him? I wanted justice. So anyway, so when he read the letter, he was livid. He decided he's going to make an example out of him.
Out of your brother?
Yeah. So then he stopped all forms of funding. And I remember just thinking to myself, you're so evil. You know he's in Cape Town. But in 2008, he came home for the holidays. That was now 2 years later. So when my brother came home, I studied him. I sat back. I really wanted to see, if you say you forgave my dad, what does that look like? Okay. And then we loved hip hop. And when he came back, he was destroying all the CDs. In my mind, I'm like, you could sell that. No, I'm trying to save all of these things. But he broke everything. He was throwing away old magazines. And I'm like, okay, what's happening here? So he's in the back house that's opposite my bedroom. So I could hear the music he was playing. And I'm listening through the window. And I'm like, what is that? Because I didn't know some of those songs. That sort of drew interest, but I still didn't ask him yet. The first Sunday, I think he went to church by himself. During the week, as he's cleaning, he's playing this music loud. There was one song that really struck me. It's called Jesus, You Gave It All. As it's still playing, I remembered some of the things I learned at Bible study. And I went to him. I was like, are you going to church? He said, yes. I was like, okay, I want to come with you. So we went to the Potter's house in Sunnyside.
And how old were you at this time?
I was 15.
Okay.
And we got there. I don't even remember what they preached, but everybody was just smiling and greeting and whatever. So came the altar call. I just remember hearing something like, we're all born sinners. Now I'm trying to negotiate with myself. And I just went to the altar. I said the sinner's prayer. I don't think I felt anything different. But one of the things that I do know was that I felt like this can be my home. I like the fact that if you ask somebody something, they actually answer you back. And then we went again. And then he was like, listen, I'm going to go back. And then if you need money to go to church, because I know dad's not going to give you, just let me know. I didn't know at that time that you can go to church with pants if you don't have skirts. So I was wearing my sister's like bigger clothes and I'm tying everything together. So
yeah, just as a side note, because that's come up a few times, that a lot of African churches, they require you to wear dresses. You can't come in pants or trousers or whatever.
Yeah.
This question was actually just asked of me. Oh, if you go to your church, what can you wear? And I said, listen, there's no dress code to meet Jesus. You know, God does the work after. But it's interesting because that question has come up.
I started going and then I started saving my pocket money to put money together to like tithe or like pay my taxi fare to get to church by myself. I don't want to bother anybody like with what's happening at home. So let me just save my own money and go to church. Because I was like, I need to understand who is God? What is all of these things? I don't just want to go to church. I need to understand why there's this move of people wanting to know more about God.
And true to your form, you threw your whole self in.
Yeah, no, I was in it. I was in it to a point where the Bible studies were on a Thursday. So after basketball practice, I would just wash my face by a school basin outside, change clothes, get on the first taxi from Hammanskraal to Pretoria. And from there, I would jog all the way up. From school with a taxi to get to Pretoria, it was roughly 45 minutes. And then from the CBD, if I walk to church, that would take 20 minutes or so. In the beginning, it was a bit scary. Like my whole life has been sheltered. My parents are there. My siblings are there. I never needed to leave Hammanskraal. So Thursday nights, I committed, I'm going to be at every Bible study lesson. But during that process, I learned so much.
And so the foundations classes.
Yes. And interestingly enough, at that time, he was Brother Walid. So he was my Bible study teacher.
Okay.
He knew how to answer some of the questions I had. I think the discouragement came in when my dad realized, hold up, this girl is actually serious. And then he withdrew all forms of funding. He didn't pay my school fees, nothing. I remember we got the invoices and my mom was like, he has not paid my school fees. So for the remainder of that year, going into grade 11, my mom had to take a loan, pay our school fees and all of these things.
Did that create tension between your parents?
It did. Because now There was a part where my dad was like, if she's still a child, then she must follow our rules. And my mom was like, at least you're not doing drugs or alcohol or any of these things. She's just searching for truth. She has questions we couldn't answer. So at that point, I started, I don't know if it was hate or disliking with my dad. I started putting up this barrier off. And then towards the end of the year, there was a point where he got crazy sick. There was a concoction and a prophet. They went to some river or whatever. Now the thing was eating him from the inside out. They had to operate. And I remember my brother calling in and then he prayed with him on the phone.
Wow.
He stayed in hospital for a while, to a point where when we visited, it looked like he was starting to rot on the bed. And my older sister, she hated him because she was older. She saw a lot of things before my parents got married. And I remember we're at the bed. So I was like, do you think he's going to die? My mom, she was crying and she stepped out. I don't know. I didn't feel anything. And that scared me. Isn't there any love left in me, you know? And I remember my older sister sitting there and then she was like, he must die. I'm like, everybody decided, listen, we need help. Obviously, when you're sick, you're desperate. So we went to church together with my dad's car. So he gave us his car. And I think after he came out, we went with him. And then after my dad was fully recovered, obviously, it goes back to ZCC. There was this thing of their generation not wanting to look like traitors. After he started getting healed, in the beginning stages, he was still okay with me going to church. Now he's paying our school fees. Now when I'm asking for money, I'm trying to also push the button a bit. Stepping into matric, my dad started again. This thing of, okay, you and your white church, they always call it the white church, white Jesus. You don't respect our ways. We're Africans at the end of the day. And I remember just saying, you know what? I don't have time for this. And then at some stage, I started slowly not going to church. In my mind, I was like, I just want peace. But at the same breath, that's where the whole God complex thing started with me. I'm doing this. Why is this happening?
Yeah.
Like, why are you allowing him to do this?
So it starts with compromise.
Part of me was like, God, but why are you allowing this to happen? It feels like it's harder serving you than actually just staying at home. My mind was not centered around destiny. So for me, I started putting school first. So then I stopped. I'm angry at God. Career is number one. I trusted my dad to sort of sort out the whole application for me to go to university. I thought he applied, but he didn't follow through with the registration. And then he's like, I don't have any money. That's where the other fight started. And he's like, you guys are just going to have to give each other a break. You're just going to have to take a gap year like your other siblings.
So you were expecting, like, after matric, I'm in.
And I applied for scholarships. Some of them I didn't get it because they said I'm not financially needy. So that also made me mad. So I started blaming him for that as well. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to leave.
Like, you leave house.
Not like moving out because I didn't have that much money. But in my mind, I was like, I just have enough to travel a bit. It's like I had a whole vision board. My plan to have a PhD at 27 is over. So I felt like my whole life has ended. I was like, you know what? I haven't been to Durban, so I might as well. I told my mom, I was like, I'm going. Don't tell your husband where I'm at. I'll let you know when I've arrived. She tried to talk me out of it and I was like, the ticket is already bought. And I left. That is the first time I took a bus that long by myself. Part of me was scared, but I also have this thing of, I like the unknown.
You're very adventurous.
And then
I can see that.
I got there and I was like, okay, I want to sin. But you know, when you don't even know where to start, you're really bad at it. But in my mind, I wanted to play dirty just to hurt my dad.
But did you let your mom know?
Yes.
Do you think she told your dad?
No. Because the second week, she called me actually. Then Mpho, you need to come back, please. I can't keep on keeping the secret. And I'm like, okay, Mom, I'll come back. But also deep down, I was like, I'm running out of money, sir. And then when I came back, and I just passed him by, went to my room. So I had like a mini business that I was doing where I was making invitation cards. I was doing that on the side to get a bit of money, but that business was not pushing. And I was like, oh, hold up. I used to work at an internet cafe. Let me go back and check if they have anything. And he was like, oh yeah, I think I might have something, but not now. Maybe just check around next week. Then I was like, okay, I used to also work at the library. Let me go to the library. They were like, we don't have anything unless you're volunteering. I was like, nah, fam, I need money. So the maximum number of books you could take was like 6 at a time. So I would take 6 books. And I would be living in books, basically, like an escape.
Yeah, for sure.
And I would be in my room. I didn't open my curtains. I would just eat popcorn, drink Coke. I was also avoiding my dad. And eventually the librarians were like, this is not normal. You can't keep returning 6 books every second day. So then I eventually went back to the internet cafe. Then I started working there.
Okay.
And then I started now experimenting. I had a friend who was not in school as well. Now I got exposed to the party life.
Okay.
He did have like an alcohol problem, but we sort of brushed it over. And I thought, okay, maybe I can be a good influence on her. Little did I know it would be the other way around.
Yeah.
So eventually the time when I tried alcohol was around March. my birthday. Now they bring like free cocktails and everything. So now I'm tasting things. So the only thing I could drink was like cocktails. Like all the other ones would be like a sip. I'm like, no, this is too bitter. I can't do this. Where it started getting dangerous was the time when I got drunk. I passed out. When I woke up, I'm in a karakara, like these taxis. Where am I? And I passed out again. And then when I woke up, I'm like, these people are not friends because they were not there. But I still kept her because, again, she was the one who's not studying. So if I wanted to hang out with somebody, it's just her. But my friend, she had a boyfriend who came with another friend. Mm-hmm. So at that time, I didn't know that's kind of like how they play. And I remember that evening, I'm looking at him and it's kind of like he's expecting something from me. And he's like, so aren't you going to like do what? He's like, have sex with me. I'm like, no. I'm like, I'm a virgin. That time I'm drunk, but I was like, no. Yeah. I knew sex before marriage is a sin. I didn't know why. But what I also didn't know though was that any other sexually immoral act is a sin, not just only sexual intercourse. So for me, it was a thing of, oh, okay, I can kiss you or we can fool around, but just do not go any further. There, yeah. And then what happened for the rest of the evening, he's like, but I can't go out now. Then my friend's going to think that I didn't smash you. So I was like, for the sake of your reputation, then you can sit there and we can chat until the sun comes up, but you're not laying next to me. He did step out of the room and he went to go sleep on the sofa when he heard that his other friend was sleeping.
So now his reputation is saved.
His reputation.
But what about yours?
Like that's, but here's the tricky part. I didn't think about mine. Yeah. I didn't think about mine.
You went all in. I mean, you went from literally good girl your whole life. And then as soon as you matured, you're like upside down.
Yeah, I was like, I'm done with this. And then I left it. So I went back to work. The girl I used to work with had gotten a better job. Literally, the business was opposite where the internet cafe shop was. I was working with this other lady at reception and they started liking me. And then the uncles were like, you would actually make a very great bride. I was like, just leave me alone. I did not care anything about boys. I was like, I just want to focus on getting money. Yeah. School was the whole world for me. So what they did was the first official relationship that I got in was actually an arranged one. So that relationship ended up being like a romantic one. And I remember the guy, he told me, he was like, okay, you're going to be my wife. And after he said that, I sort of let my guards down. So he was my first sexual encounter.
Okay. And that was because there was the understanding
of we're going to get married. But I was like, listen, I don't do cultural stuff. Meaning I left DCC. And when I left, I really left. So I'm not going to do lobola or anything like that.
Was he okay with it?
He was trying to fight that one. And then he was like, you say you're not going to do it. But if I feel like I want to just give your parents then a gift to say thank you, I'm going to do it.
You're still living at home?
I was still living at home, but some weekends I'll be by him.
Okay. And how did your parents think about all this?
They buy the book to a certain extent. So with my dad, I didn't tell him. With my mom, I did. I was very open with my mom. And I did let them meet. So he wanted to get married that same year. And then I was like, make sure I'm going to school. And he's like, if I marry you, your dad's not going to help you with your fees. And I'm not at a point where I'll be able to pay your full school fees and stuff. So we'll get married after. So I got my driver's license in that year. I saved up so that I can do my own applications because I was like, I can't trust my dad. He messed up my application last year. I'm not going to miss out on another opportunity for school. So I had already paid all of that. And then I didn't tell my dad.
So are you actually engaged? Like, do you have a ring or is it just an understanding?
It's an understanding.
Okay.
What we did now is always started to plan the future. This is how we can do it. So he started planning his life around what I'm saying, right? So now I'm still in first year. And I remember the vow I made at the altar in Sunnyside. It just came to me that day. I remember saying, God, just help me get to Pretoria so that I can be able to come to church. Then it started eating me up. And I was like, you have to be a girl of your word. I went and then I saw some familiar faces. I think now it is Pastor Garth. And then after service, they were like, oh, let's drop you off. And I'm like, now they're going to see where I stay.
So you never answered the altar call again. You were just like, church was...
Because I knew this time around, I knew I'm living in sin. And then I left church. Yeah, I just went, I think twice, once or twice. And then school was, again, my life, my everything when I'm in Pittsburgh. And then I went back home. Remember, I'm still in this relationship, planned. And then he now moved to, I think, Mpumalanga. He was working for SPAR. After this project, he's resigning. And then we can start with all the plans and then sort of lay out our future. There was a day we're traveling back home from school. I'm on a bus. So I was just listening to my music, minding my own business. And then I heard, you think you're right, but you might be going to hell. And I woke up, I'm like, what is this? And then I checked my phone. It was a sermon called Reprobate. And he was basically preaching on Romans 1:26. And then he made an illustration and it sounded exactly like my story. Like you come and say, oh Lord, I'm sorry. And then you go back and you come, you say, oh Lord, I really, really mean it this time. So when he said that, I'm like, whoa, that sounds like it's me. And I just started crying on the bus. I'm by myself. I started crying. I did a sinner's prayer by myself on the bus. That Sunday, I was back in church. And then I went to the altar.
So that was like your moment.
That was my moment. And from that moment, I was like, now I know what I need to do. Like, but this is going to be hard. After that, I delayed it a bit to break it off with my boyfriend because I'm like, he's in a different province. I don't need to do it now.
Yeah, it's not like
I was like,
sinning.
I'm not sinning. So I'm not doing anything. He's far away from me. I don't want to deal with that now because I made so many promises. So I left it. And then I get a phone call. Oh yeah, I resigned. This is what we're going to do. And I'm like, God, how do I do this now? I think a week passed. So now I'm going to church now, faithfully.
And you feel different. You feel like you're serious.
Now the whole thing of hell is real started to sort of click.
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting. Beforehand, it was more of, I'm looking for answers.
Yeah.
Now it's more of, but you're going to die. And when you die, where do you go?
Yeah.
You know, and
because now you've experienced the world. And before it was just like, I'm a good person.
That's the thing. So for me, it felt like sexual immorality was like the worst sin out there, you know? So I'm in church now. And in my mind, it's like the Holy Spirit said, you're going to have to do it now. You cannot wait any longer. So then I called him. And I was like, hi, how are you doing? I just want to tell you.
I can already feel like the pressure.
Like I was crying before I even said the words. I was like, listen, so I went to church and this is the life that I want to live. And I just hope that you understand. And he was like, you can't break up with me. And he's like, I'm coming right now. I'll be there in 2 hours. That night, I remember telling my sister, this night is the night I die. Because
so you were scared.
I was scared now because I was like, I've never heard of such situations before. This guy resigned. He moved his whole life around. He's about to move back. This is what he did based on my word. When he got to the gate, he's like, come out. We need to talk. So I told my sister, if I don't come back, this is the name of the guy who murdered me. This is where he stays. This is his mom's name.
Wow.
That's what I did. And then I'm in the car with him and he's like, just please explain to me what you're saying. I'm like, I gave my life to Christ. This is the life God wants me to live. I need to live in purity. So I need you to give your life to Christ first if you want to rescue this relationship. And then he's like, you know what? This is a lot. Can I just sleep on this and then we'll talk again? But as far as I'm concerned, we didn't break up. And I went back in the house. I'm like, okay, God, I feel a bit of relief, but in the same breath, I feel like he doesn't get what I'm saying.
Yeah.
And then I was like, okay, maybe let me give him a week. So then I called him like, did you find it? She's like, no, not yet. I was busy. I was working on Sunday. You know, I work some Sundays. Da, 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 da. And then I remember there was a time when he was like, oh no, come over quickly. We just want to look at something. And in my mind, I'm like, okay, I'm strong enough. I will survive this. And I slept with him again. I'm like, clearly, I'm not strong enough. Now I'm doing the sinner's prayer again. Then I remembered, reprobate. Clearly, I need to cut this loose.
Yeah.
There's no halfway.
Because the devil knows how to get you. And
exactly.
You've already been yoked, right? You think you're strong enough.
I don't want to ever feel like this again. I eventually made the call. We can't be together because clearly you're not taking this seriously and this is what I want. I think it was in February. And he's like, on Valentine's month, something like that. I was like, listen, hell is real. Bye. And then I blocked the number. I deleted everything. So I had this thing of if I cut something loose, like it must be gone, like done. Mm-hmm. And I remember telling my mom loved him. And she was like, why would you do such a thing? Where are you ever going to find somebody like this who respects you, who listens to you?
He seemed like a good guy.
He was a really good guy. And I really felt so bad. And I remember just asking God, I was like, I really hope he finds you and finds somebody that he will love. Now I'm like, okay, now I can really serve God. Mm-hmm. The thing of me deleting, cutting, blocking, it helps because then I don't look back. That's when I started turning up the heat. From that point onwards, that's when I think the relationship with me and Sister Anne started building in the church. And then we started then becoming really close. And she's like, you know what? Every time we have a revival, you can come sleep over by me. So that's when I started being more in church. Mm-hmm. I was like, I'm actually really liking this. So later that year, that's when Pastor Walid and Sister Anne were sent out. Because we were also so close, we became family. So when they got sent, and I was like, God, I want to see how churches start from the beginning. So their church was actually sent to Silverton, but they ended up getting a building in Mayors Park. Some Sundays I'd be by my sister. So Mayors Park was where I officially started being in ministry. There was a time when I received a letter. I think my doctor said I must come in. They've now eventually found a blood specialist. And then I went in And then they told me, no, they need to take some samples and stuff. Because remember, by this time, they still didn't know what was wrong with me.
Yeah.
And then the guy said to me, I have von Willebrand's disease, which is incurable. You can treat it, but you can't cure it. And my mom started crying. Does it mean she has to be on this medication for her whole life? They said yes. My dad was like, but everything is becoming so expensive. It would go over his medical aid bill. Then he would have to pay extra on the side. And I remember I was on my way home and I was just crying. I called my brother and I was like, listen, this is what they're saying. And he was like, we're not going to accept that. I'm like, okay. And he's like, we're going to pray. And I mean, at this point, I was so tired because I'd already been through a bone marrow extraction. Like there were so many tests done on me. I was tired. And I remember in that year, I can't remember who preached the sermon about the woman with the issue of blood. And I found myself in that story and that was me. So my brother prayed, we prayed. And I remember I just got that conviction of if I believe God's going to do this, then I can't take the medication. It was very scary.
Yeah. Just for anyone that's listening, we believe in doctors. We believe that they have wisdom. And so it has to be from God. If you have decided that God wants you to test that, that's a personal thing, right? I'm not advocating for everyone to do this, but obviously in your situation, I believe you felt like God was pushing you. And so I can totally agree with that.
Faith without action is dead. And I'm like, so do I have faith if I didn't?
Okay.
So God was really pushing me to do that. And then I stopped. I was a bit nervous. Second day, I think I'm still feeling good, but time will tell only when my period comes. And before I knew it, I even forgot that I used to take medication. And after like a year, my dad came back and he's like, okay, the lab saying that you didn't collect this medication, whatever. And then in my mind, I'm like, I've been healed for a year. And I remember calling my brother. I was like, tell everybody who was praying with you because I've been fine. And I'm still fine even now.
So did you tell your dad that you had stopped taking the medicine after this year?
Afterwards, I told him. And he was like, so you believe God healed you? And I said, God healed me. And that's a revelation. That's my personal.
So did you go to the doctor and
afterwards? No. I left it. I was like, I'm healed. I never, ever struggle with heavy flows again or anything like that. The only other time I actually tested my iron, only now, because you asked me the question. I never did back then. I was like, I'm healed. I'm good. I don't want to hear anything.
So what you're talking about, just for those that don't know, is when we had spoken a couple weeks back, you had mentioned that your blood type was O.
Yes.
And I had asked you if you'd ever donated because I know that is such a good blood type to donate.
Yeah.
And you said no because, and then you told me a little bit about your blood things.
Yeah.
So then you sent me a picture.
Yeah.
You were actually donating blood.
Yeah.
And then that's when they tested your hemoglobin level.
Yes.
And what was that level?
It was 13.4. The minimum is 12.
Yes.
And that's when I started crying and I was testifying at the blood bank. I was like, I'm here because somebody else gave. Right? So I want to give back.
Yeah.
And I was able to donate. And they were like, every second month I can come back.
And it's in short supply in South Africa. It really
Exactly. And I remembered how I suffered with my first night in hospital when they didn't have enough. So that's why I want to give back. I know now that you are real because I always questioned. I was like, you know what? I saw you heal me. So I know you as my healer. I know you as Jehovah Rapha. I saw you come through in my finances because things didn't work out the way I planned it. So I know him as my provider as well. But one of the things that I was still struggling with is trusting him with my future. And I remember there was a revival where I went to the altar. Why am I doing this? Why am I not trusting God? But I remember getting that conviction of because you have not died to yourself yet, you still want to be in control. And the moment I stopped fighting him, that's when I got my freedom. Like being okay with not knowing the future.
Yeah.
But also now embracing God's love. Surrender early, don't fight. Like it's not worth it because now I look back and I'm like, so I delayed my own revelation because of my pride.
Unfortunately, that's super common, right? And you said it really well. Sometimes the goodness of your home, it is such a blessing.
Yeah.
But it can feed that pride, right? When you grow up in such a desperate situation, you're very eager to take whatever God's offering. Because I would say I grew up very similar, even if it was in our fellowship, but with that pride in the sense of, well, everything was so good. You weren't so desperate. So I think sometimes it's harder to find out that you're your own worst enemy because you can just make things happen, right?
Exactly.
Everything works out good. And then you think, why did I wait so long to have this that I really do need you?
Yep. Exactly. So with me, my pride was, okay, I can do this by myself.
Yeah.
And when I realized, things don't always happen your way.
Yeah.
And so for me, I needed to be broken so that I could actually see who God really is.
And I think what it is you just need to be surrendered. I think that's a good place to end it, because I like what you said. Your parents gave you all the best in the beginning.
Yeah.
And that you still had to find your own path to God. But you and then your brother, you guys are going to be what's now drawing your parents to the truth. I mean, the Bible is very clear. It says he wants no one to perish.
Yes.
Our whole goal is get on the path, go forward.
Yeah.
Aim that way.
Absolutely.
And
no U-turns.
So yeah, thanks for taking the time. I know we went.
Pleasure. I should have warned you, actually.
No, it's fine. So I want to say thank you for taking the time, for traveling.
I didn't cry.
It's hard to talk about God without being emotional about it, because you really, when you look back at your life, you think, I am so grateful.
Especially with me, because I was a person who loved immediate judgment. And when I realized that I didn't get immediate judgment, I was like, whoa. So that's what love is. So thank you so much.
So as always, I want to thank each and every one of you that are listening. If you have stuck with us this whole time, I appreciate it. I say this every time, but without a listener, the story can't be heard. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it. We never know the impact someone's testimony can have on another person, as evidenced by Mpho's testimony. If you are not a Christian and you are listening to this, or maybe you were, but you've turned away, it's not too late. All you have to do is acknowledge you're a sinner, ask Jesus Christ to come in your heart and forgive you of that sin. John 3:16 says God sent his only son because he loves us, and just a simple prayer can be the beginning of your new story. Until next time, this is Rachel Heimberg, and you've been listening to Not the Same.